10%. That was the entirety of my request, a modest adjustment to bring my salary closer to the industry standard after over a decade of loyalty. But instead of serious consideration, Julian's uproarious laughter echoed off the glass walls of his corner office, bouncing around my ears like jagged razor blades. You want a 10% raise after what, 12 years? He could not even finish his insulting sentence before another wave of laughter shook his shoulders, spilling his coffee slightly onto his mahogany desk. I stood absolutely frozen in front of him, clutching my heavy portfolio of professional achievements, the tangible proof of my value to his enterprise. The 60-page document contained every intricate algorithm, every massive process improvement, every grueling late night I had sacrificed over the years, while he effortlessly collected annual bonuses large enough to buy multiple vacation homes. The complex automated system I designed and implemented entirely by myself cut our average delivery times in half, I said, my voice sounding much smaller and far less confident than I wanted it to be in that pivotal moment. The Northwood corporate account alone was secured based solely on the unprecedented efficiency metrics I personally generated over the last fiscal year. Julian cavalierly waved his hand dismissively, still loudly chuckling to himself as he leaned far back in his leather executive chair, completely unbothered by my distress. Everyone is ultimately replaceable in this industry, you know, even you. He stared directly at me with that highly practiced executive smile that never quite managed to reach his calculating eyes. If you honestly think you are worth more than what we currently pay you, I highly suggest you try your luck elsewhere in the market. I felt something vital crack and splinter inside me right then. It was not my heart, but something significantly deeper and far more foundational. It was the complete collapse of 12 years of steadfast loyalty, of stubbornly believing that eventually hard work and measurable results would be properly recognized and rewarded by upper management. I understand perfectly, I said very quietly, carefully collecting my thick portfolio from the edge of his immaculate desk. The crisp printed pages trembled noticeably between my nervous fingers. Listen, Sylvia. Julian's booming voice suddenly softened with a sickeningly artificial layer of faux concern. You are quite good at what you specifically do, but you are ultimately just a back-office support function. The executive board of directors does not even know your name, let alone what your daily tasks entail. That is just the harsh reality of corporate business. My glowing computer screen brightly showed an unread email notification. It was the quarterly company newsletter prominently featuring a massive front-page spread on how Julian's supposedly innovative supply chain revolution had miraculously saved our biggest, most demanding client, Northwood. It was my revolution, my grueling 18-hour workdays for 6 agonizing months straight, my elegant mathematical solution that demonstrably cut their sprawling logistics costs by exactly 40%. Beside my worn keyboard sat the bitter, cold coffee I had abandoned 3 anxious hours ago when I had finally gathered the requisite courage to schedule the meeting and ask for that modest raise. Beside it rested a small framed photo of my working-class parents. My dad worked 35 strenuous years at the exact same manufacturing factory before they ruthlessly closed it down and outsourced the jobs. Corporate loyalty really matters, he always proudly said, wearing his company jacket. Mom always nodded along in agreement, fully believing it too. I slowly opened my bottom desk drawer and deliberately pulled out a small, worn leather notebook I always kept hidden there. Inside its lined pages were hundreds of brilliant ideas I had meticulously jotted down over the long years. These were my deeply personal projects, comprehensively documented with exact dates, times, and exhaustive development notes. These were highly complex ideas I had excitedly explored on quiet weekends, endlessly refined on my own personal home laptop, and methodically built on my own free time outside of working hours. They were ideas the greedy company had casually implemented, without ever executing a formal acquisition agreement, because I had simply been far too accommodating, far too eager to desperately prove my worth to executives who barely knew my name. I slowly flipped through the delicate pages, finally stopping at my extensive notes from 3 years ago. It was a dense series of complex routing algorithms that eventually became the essential, irreplaceable backbone of our entire global distribution system. At the very top of the aged page, my neat handwriting clearly and unequivocally labeled the intricate work as a personal, independent project, explicitly noting that it was developed exclusively on my home computer equipment during evening hours. What Julian absolutely never knew, and what the company's highly paid but terribly lazy legal department had been far too careless to thoroughly investigate, was that I had never signed over the legal rights to these massive personal innovations. The standard boilerplate employment contract I had signed 12 years ago strictly covered work explicitly done during scheduled company time, utilizing company-provided resources and equipment. But under the strict provisions of California Labor Code, Section 2870, inventions and intellectual property developed entirely on an employee's own personal time without ever using the employer's equipment, supplies, facilities, or confidential trade secret information are completely legally exempt from any corporate assignment clauses. My most valuable, world-class creations were meticulously documented as independent personal projects developed solely on my own equipment during my own free time. Apex Logistics was essentially using my incredibly valuable intellectual property entirely for free, without any legal right or formal licensing agreement. I picked up my smartphone and nervously scrolled to a business contact number I had saved years ago but never actually called. Brody, the highly respected operations director at our absolutely largest and most aggressive competitor, Horizon Logistics, had persistently reached out to me multiple times over the last few years. His very last direct message, sent exactly 6 months ago, still lingered prominently in my crowded inbox. The generous offer still stands whenever you are finally ready to make a move. We actually value and fiercely reward true innovators here. My trembling index finger hovered hesitantly over the bright green call button. 12 long years of ingrained corporate loyalty screamed loudly at me to stop immediately, to be reasonable and passive. Then I vividly remembered the harsh, mocking sound of Julian's laughter echoing in his corner office. I firmly pressed call. Horizon Logistics, this is Brody speaking. The voice was smooth and professional. This is Sylvia from Apex Logistics, I said. I paused, genuinely surprised by the absolute, unwavering steadiness in my own voice. I strongly believe we should finally have that long-overdue conversation, Sylvia. A wave of palpable excitement rippled clearly through his voice over the line. I was honestly beginning to think you would never actually call me. Are you by any chance free for a confidential dinner meeting tonight? I took a long, slow sip of my ice water, desperately trying to gather my racing thoughts and slow my wildly pounding pulse. What exactly are you proposing and offering me tonight? I asked directly. A senior executive leadership position, exactly triple your current pathetic base salary, highly lucrative stock options that vest immediately, and a fully funded, dedicated engineering team of your very own to manage. He leaned forward earnestly, resting his strong forearms heavily on the pristine white linen tablecloth. But far more importantly than the money, Sylvia, we are offering you true professional recognition. Your actual name will proudly be on your work, visible to the entire industry. And what if I brought my most valuable personal innovations with me? I asked tentatively, testing the waters. The highly theoretical, incredibly complex routing systems I meticulously developed entirely on my own time, exclusively using my own personal resources and equipment? Something intense immediately flickered in Brody's dark eyes. He nodded very slowly, choosing his words carefully. We have a highly structured, legally sound intellectual property acquisition process that includes extremely fair financial compensation. Unlike some arrogant companies we both know, we absolutely do not expect to magically own our loyal employees' personal creative output by default without paying for it. I slowly reached into my leather tote bag, pulled out my battered leather notebook, and placed it firmly on the table between us. I have exhaustive, time-stamped documentation proving beyond a shadow of a doubt that these massive systems were entirely personal projects, explicitly protected from corporate claim under California Labor Code Section 2870. Apex Logistics foolishly implemented them to save their dying business, but they absolutely never formally acquired them or paid me a single dime for the rights. Horizon Logistics could easily step in to legally license or outright purchase them from me directly. Brody's eyes widened significantly as he quickly grasped the massive, industry-shaking implications of what I was offering. That is quite a staggering, catastrophic oversight on their highly paid legal team's part. Julian absolutely does not value back-office support functions, I said coldly, intentionally echoing the arrogant CEO's mocking words from earlier that day. Including his own legal department, apparently. Over the next 2 intense hours, we aggressively hammered out the intricate details of the arrangement. Brody was so incredibly excited that he actually brought in Horizon's senior legal counsel via a secure conference call right there at the dinner table to immediately verify the immense legal strength of my documentation. They were absolutely astounded by my meticulous record-keeping habits. Every single timestamp, every personal code repository commit, every casual email where I had vaguely suggested implementing the system without ever explicitly handing over legal ownership was perfectly preserved. By the time the rich chocolate dessert finally arrived at our table, I had a formal, legally binding offer letter sitting securely in my email inbox that literally made my jaw drop open in sheer shock. Not only was the guaranteed base salary exactly triple my current meager pay, but the massive signing bonus alone was more than enough to completely pay off my entire house mortgage in one lump sum. More importantly, the ironclad contract explicitly and permanently recognized my sole ownership of the predictive modeling algorithms and included a highly lucrative, multi-million-dollar perpetual licensing agreement for Horizon Logistics to legally utilize them globally. 2 excruciatingly long weeks later, I marched into the executive suite and placed my crisp, single-page resignation letter squarely on Julian's massive, obnoxiously large oak desk. He barely bothered to look up from his glowing computer screen as he snatched the paper. 2 weeks' notice. He quickly scanned the short, highly formal letter with a look of mild annoyance. "Where exactly are you going?" I briefly considered lying to avoid immediate conflict, but decided the unvarnished, brutal truth had far more impact. Horizon Logistics. That immediately got his full attention. His large head snapped up, his cold eyes instantly narrowing into hostile, calculating slits. Our direct, biggest competitor. "That is incredibly unfortunate timing on your part, Sylvia. We are currently in the final, highly sensitive stages of negotiations with Northwood to massively expand our logistics contract for another 5 lucrative years." "I know perfectly well," I said smoothly, my voice completely devoid of emotion. "I personally built and validated the entire mathematical delivery model for that precise expansion proposal." Julian's smug expression instantly shifted from arrogant surprise to something closely resembling genuine, deep-seated corporate concern. "We really should sit down and seriously discuss some retention options, Sylvia. Perhaps we can revisit that modest raise you mentioned previously." I shook my head slowly. The standing offer from Horizon Logistics is exactly triple my current base salary, plus a senior executive leadership position and incredibly generous stock options. He laughed out loud again, but the sound was completely hollow, strained, and nervous now. "They are severely overpaying you," he sneered defensively. "You will be very bitterly disappointed when they finally realize you cannot possibly deliver the massive results they are clearly expecting for that kind of money." I simply smiled, feeling a strange, intoxicating, and immensely powerful new confidence blooming deep inside my chest. "We will certainly see about that, Julian. My last 2 weeks at Apex Logistics were oddly, wonderfully peaceful. I dutifully completed all my required transition documents and patiently trained my nervous replacement, a recent college graduate who seemed both deeply terrified and intensely impressed by the wildly complex routing systems he was now somehow inheriting. I made absolutely sure to thoroughly back up all my personal project documentation and source code to multiple secure off-site servers. I also deliberately made legally certified digital copies of all internal corporate emails where I had casually shared my personal innovations with the company, without ever executing any formal transfer of intellectual property ownership. Every single night in my quiet apartment, I obsessively reviewed the applicable legal codes. I knew exactly where I stood under the strict provisions of the Federal Copyright Act, specifically Title 17 of the United States Code, Section 106, the absolute, exclusive legal right to reproduce, distribute, and perform the copyrighted work belonged solely to me. Apex Logistics was blissfully unaware that they were about to face a very harsh, incredibly expensive legal reality check. What personal property? Donovan's forehead creased deeply in profound professional confusion. I calmly opened my thick leather notebook, clearly showing him my meticulously dated handwritten entries, printed source code repositories, and secure digital timestamps. These incredibly complex routing algorithms and predictive logistics systems were developed entirely on my own personal time, exclusively using my own personal home resources. Apex Logistics happily implemented them to save millions, but management never bothered to complete any formal IP acquisition process or offer any compensation. I have the exhaustive documentation to legally prove they fall squarely under the strict exemption of California Labor Code, Section 2870. Donovan's smug expression changed incredibly rapidly as he frantically flipped through the pages of my notebook, the color completely draining from his usually flushed face as the horrifying legal recognition fully dawned on him. These are the absolute core operational systems we use for literally everything we do. The entire massive Northwood account relies exclusively on this specific mathematical framework. I finished the terrifying thought for him with a cold smile. Yes, they absolutely do. And you do not own them. He stared at me in sheer horror, then looked frantically back down at the notebook, his hand shaking noticeably. I need to make some urgent phone calls right this second. Of course you do, I said cheerfully, calmly closing the notebook, placing it in my bag, and standing up. But my legal employment here ends precisely today at exactly 5 o'clock, and my personal intellectual property legally leaves the building with me. I confidently walked out of Apex Logistics' towering glass headquarters for the absolute last time at exactly 5:17 on a crisp Friday afternoon. I did not look back once. By early Monday morning, I was sitting comfortably in my stunning, massive new corner executive office at Horizon Logistics, enthusiastically explaining to my highly dedicated new team of 5 brilliant algorithm specialists exactly how we were going to fundamentally revolutionize the entire global shipping industry. They were incredibly bright, endlessly eager, and actually listened intently to my technical insights without ever interrupting or dismissing my ideas. Exactly 6 weeks later, the very first full-scale implementation of my proprietary routing systems went completely live across Horizon's massive national network. The operational results were immediate, undeniable, and absolutely staggering to everyone involved. Average delivery times dropped by an unprecedented 30% across the entire board. Total operating costs fell by a massive 25% in just a single fiscal quarter, shattering every internal projection. Our aggressive, highly motivated sales team immediately approached the Northwood executives with rock-solid hard data definitively, showing we could drastically outperform Apex's absolute best historical metrics by a significant, undeniable margin. The crisp Tuesday morning that Northwood formally and publicly announced, they were immediately switching their massive multi-million-dollar global logistics contract over to Horizon. My personal cell phone rang frantically. Julian's name flashed brightly and repeatedly on the screen. I smiled and let it go straight to voicemail. He called exactly 3 more times in rapid, desperate succession before finally leaving a breathless, panicked audio message. Sylvia, this is Julian. We need to talk immediately about incredibly lucrative independent consulting opportunities for you. Apex is fully prepared to offer a highly substantial, unprecedented compensation package to get you back. Please call me back as soon as humanly possible. It is urgent. I carefully saved the audio message to a highly secure, encrypted cloud folder for my legal records, but did not bother to return the frantic call. Exactly 2 days later, Julian was physically waiting beside my car in the dimly lit Horizon Executive parking garage. This is highly inappropriate and bordering on harassment, I said loudly, keeping a very safe physical distance and resting my hand firmly on my car keys. You have single-handedly put 300 innocent jobs at severe risk, he said, his voice low, raspy, and practically dripping with desperation. Apex is currently facing a catastrophic financial crisis entirely because of what you spitefully took from us. I did not take a single thing that legally belonged to Apex Logistics, I replied with icy, unwavering calm. I simply retained my own personal intellectual property that Apex illegally exploited for years without proper acquisition or compensation. Under the strict provisions of Title 17 of the United States Code, Section 106, your company absolutely never held the legal reproduction or distribution rights. Nobody in the industry will ever believe that ridiculous legal technicality. He spat angrily. It looks exactly like malicious corporate espionage. I have fully dated, legally certified documentation of every single personal project, every single operational implementation, and every single email conversation where ownership was clearly never transferred. Your highly paid legal team completely failed to do their job, and you were far too arrogant and absolutely never valued my incredible contributions enough to care about the legal details. You thought you could just take my work for free forever. The following financial quarter, Apex Logistics' publicly traded stock plummeted a truly staggering, unprecedented 62% in value. They abruptly and callously laid off 200 incredibly loyal, hardworking employees with zero notice. The prominent financial news articles uniformly described the spectacular collapse as a catastrophic, completely inexplicable loss of core technical capability and a deeply mysterious deterioration of their once award-winning, industry-leading logistics systems. Julian was officially forced to resign in complete disgrace under immense, unrelenting pressure from the furious, panicked board of directors. I calmly watched the live, highly publicized televised announcement from the comfort of my spacious executive office while casually finalizing the complex, highly profitable implementation plans for 3 massive new corporate clients who had eagerly switched their lucrative accounts from Apex to Horizon. Then, entirely as expected, came the inevitable, desperate corporate lawsuit. Apex officially and aggressively sued me for the alleged massive theft of corporate intellectual property, devastating corporate espionage, and severe breach of fiduciary duty. Their incredibly aggressive, highly publicized legal case collapsed absolutely spectacularly during the very initial legal discovery phase. My comprehensive, completely bulletproof documentation proved beyond any shadow of a reasonable doubt that I had meticulously developed the core algorithms entirely as personal projects on my own time. The stern federal judge dismissed the entire massive case with extreme prejudice, noting very sternly and publicly in his final written ruling that Apex Logistics had completely, negligently failed to secure proper legal ownership of the massive innovations they had so heavily and foolishly relied upon, entirely ignoring basic, fundamental state labor code exemptions regarding employee inventions. The sunny morning immediately after the federal case was publicly dismissed, I received a truly unexpected surprise visitor at the Horizon corporate headquarters. It was Julian, looking absolutely nothing like the arrogant, supremely confident CEO who had so cruelly laughed at me just a few short months earlier. His expensive designer suit hung very loosely and sadly on his noticeably thinning frame. "You deliberately destroyed absolutely everything I built," he said softly, standing awkwardly and pathetically in my large office doorway. "No," I corrected him immediately, not raising my voice but speaking with absolute, unwavering certainty. "You absolutely did that to yourself, when you consciously and arrogantly decided that some brilliant people were merely disposable cogs in your machine. Those innocent, hard-working people who tragically lost their jobs, they were not just meaningless numbers or statistics on a quarterly financial spreadsheet. They had real families, heavy underwater mortgages, and young children in expensive colleges." I felt the immense, crushing weight of his accusatory words, the incredibly deep moral complexity of exactly what had transpired. "I know perfectly well what happened to them," I replied very steadily. "That is precisely why Horizon Logistics has aggressively and intentionally hired 57 highly qualified former Apex employees in just the last 3 short months. Hardworking people who were absolutely not responsible for your terrible, arrogant executive decisions should absolutely not suffer financial ruin for them." Julian stared blankly at me, desperately searching for something, anything, perhaps a shred of guilt or regret, in my calm expression. "You maliciously planned all of this from the very start, did you not?" "No, I simply and finally stopped allowing myself to be severely undervalued and ruthlessly exploited by someone lesser than me." I met his defeated gaze directly, holding it firmly until he finally weakly looked away in shame. You could have easily, cheaply prevented this entire disastrous, company-destroying situation with a simple, highly justified 10% raise and some base, sick, fundamental human respect. He slowly turned around and left the building without saying another single word. I stood and watched quietly through my large, pristine office window as he slowly crossed the sprawling parking lot, his shoulders deeply hunched, a broken, utterly humiliated former CEO of what had once been the undisputed, shining industry leader. That very same evening, I received an absolutely ecstatic, highly complimentary email directly from Northwood's senior procurement director. The recent logistics implementation has heavily exceeded our absolute wildest corporate expectations. Your average delivery times are a staggering 40% better than our previous terrible provider. The Global Executive Board has just unanimously approved massively expanding our entire international contract exclusively with Horizon. Exactly 6 months into my highly successful new executive role at Horizon Logistics, the absolute full devastating impact of my defining decision was still rapidly unfolding across the entire industry. Apex's publicly traded stock had absolutely not recovered and was hovering near penny stock territory. Prominent industry analysts were constantly writing extensive, highly critical academic case studies about their absolutely catastrophic talent management failure and catastrophic IP loss. Meanwhile, Horizon had aggressively claimed 23% of Apex's rapidly dwindling remaining market share. My direct office phone rang unexpectedly on a quiet Tuesday afternoon. The front desk receptionist's voice sounded highly hesitant and slightly confused. "There is an older woman here to see you. She strongly insists she used to work with you over at Apex." When I curiously walked out to the sprawling, modern lobby, I found Chloe standing there nervously. She had been Apex's incredibly dedicated head of customer service for 15 long years, significantly longer than I had even been employed there. We had eaten lunch together occasionally, quietly commiserating about Julian's highly toxic, completely abusive leadership style. Now she stood there, clutching her cheap purse with incredibly white, tense knuckles. "Sylvia," she said quietly, her voice sounding incredibly brittle, strained, and exhausted. "I thought maybe, just maybe, we could sit down and talk." I immediately brought her back to my spacious office, warmly offered her cold water or hot coffee. She politely but firmly declined both. "I completely lost my job last week," she said without any preamble or small talk, "along with my absolute entire remaining department. 37 dedicated, loyal people, completely gone in an instant with zero severance." The incredibly heavy, devastating weight of her sorrowful words settled deeply and painfully in my chest. "Chloe, I am so incredibly, deeply sorry to hear that. Are you? Are you really?" Her deeply tired, bloodshot eyes fixed intently on mine. "Absolutely everyone in the industry is loudly saying that you are the sole reason Apex is completely falling apart, that you maliciously stole something incredibly vital and brought it over here for a massive payday." "I did absolutely not steal anything," I explained very gently but firmly, meticulously outlining my exhaustive personal project documentation and the incredibly decisive, highly publicized recent federal legal victory. She listened entirely without any change in her incredibly sad, defeated expression. "I am 56 years old, Sylvia. Who in the world is going to hire an aging customer service manager now?" I leaned forward incredibly earnestly across my desk. "Horizon absolutely will hire you. We desperately, urgently need highly experienced, deeply empathetic customer service leadership to handle our massive new influx of clients. I can easily speak directly to Brody today and get you an offer by tomorrow." She slowly shook her head, looking incredibly defeated. "I absolutely did not come here begging you for a charity job." "Then why did you come?" I asked softly. Chloe slowly looked all around my incredibly expansive, luxurious office. The incredible, sweeping city view, the sleek, modern designer furniture, the heavy brass executive nameplate proudly displayed on my door. "I just wanted to see if it was truly worth it. If whatever massive payout you got was genuinely worth what horribly happened to the rest of us innocent people." The incredibly profound, piercing question lodged deeply in my throat like a heavy, jagged stone. Was it truly worth it? The massive industry recognition, the incredible, life-changing compensation, the deep personal validation, all constantly measured against the severe collateral damage to innocent, hard-working people. It was absolutely not supposed to happen exactly like this, I said finally, my voice breaking slightly. I honestly just wanted what I had legally, rightfully earned through my own hard work. We all just want that, Sylvia. Chloe stood up incredibly slowly, looking older than her years. Some of us just simply cannot casually take an entire massive company down when we do not get what we want. After she quietly left the building, I sat entirely motionless in my chair for a long time. Instead of uselessly wallowing in deep guilt, I aggressively opened my laptop and decisively created a massive new spreadsheet. I meticulously listed every single former Apex employee I knew who had unfairly lost their job in the fallout. By midnight, working tirelessly, I had built a highly comprehensive database of exactly 212 affected people. The very next morning, I walked purposefully into Brody's office. We urgently need to talk about Apex's former employees. These are good people who unfairly lost their livelihoods entirely because of Apex's collapse. Horizon has benefited absolutely enormously from this situation. We have a profound, undeniable moral responsibility to help them. I want to formally propose a massive recruitment initiative. For those we absolutely cannot hire directly, I want Horizon to fully fund expensive placement services and extensive retraining programs. After a very long, highly contemplative moment, Brody slowly nodded in agreement. Draft the formal, detailed proposal immediately. I will personally take it to the board tomorrow. Exactly 3 weeks later, Operation Rebound was officially launched with massive funding. The entire logistics industry took immediate notice. Prominent business journals wrote incredibly glowing, highly complimentary articles about Horizon's highly innovative, deeply compassionate approach to competitor displacement. Chloe happily called me the day after the massive program was announced and immediately accepted a highly lucrative consulting role. Exactly 8 months after I left Apex, I received a truly unexpected email from Donovan, the recently fired former legal counsel. We met quickly at a small, quiet cafe. "I was let go last month," he said sadly, stirring his black coffee. "But there is something you absolutely do not know, Sylvia. Immediately after your exit interview, I went straight to Julian. He proudly showed me old, archived emails from 3 years ago. You had actually sent him highly detailed, incredibly thorough explanations of your personal algorithms, explicitly asking him to formally acquire them. Julian had arrogantly, foolishly replied, completely dismissing the need for formal legal acquisition to save a few bucks. He absolutely knew all this time that he did not own it. He deliberately, maliciously ignored the law to exploit you. I sat back, completely stunned, processing this massive, sickening revelation. Why tell me this now? Because I want you to know with absolute certainty that Apex entirely deserved exactly what happened to them, Donovan said firmly. Julian aggressively treated the entire company like utterly disposable parts. My revenge had absolutely not destroyed Apex. It had simply and effectively exposed what was already fundamentally, irreparably broken. Exactly 1 week later, Apex officially and permanently filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. Horizon happily hired over 170 former Apex staff members. Exactly 1 year after I had walked out of Julian's office, I stood proudly at a podium accepting a highly prestigious National Industry Innovation Award. True innovation is not just about writing complex algorithms, I said clearly into the microphone, looking out at the massive crowd. It is about deeply recognizing the true, inherent value in people. True revenge was absolutely not watching Apex collapse. It was finally discovering my own immense worth and fiercely, legally protecting my own intellectual property. If you are currently questioning your value, please remember that corporate loyalty absolutely must flow both ways. Always document your achievements, thoroughly understand your exact legal rights, and absolutely never, ever apologize for demanding to be valued appropriately. No one else determines your absolute value but you.